We're rolling. Hello, everyone. We're rolling for another episode of the JJF1 podcast, where Jonah and Jordan talk about all things related to F1. Today, as Canadians, we're coming with a little bit of news that we didn't want to hear. We got news today that officially the Canadian Grand Prix for 2021 is canceled, and it is going to be replaced with Istanbul Park in Turkey. However, the contract, which kept the Canadian Grand Prix on the calendar until 2029, has thus been extended for 2 more years. So now the Canadian Grand Prix will be held in Montreal up until 2031. So Jordan, we got some sad news today. How are you feeling?
Yeah, some big news coming out of the F1 world. And as Canadians, it's something as F1 fans, as Canadians, that we look forward to every year. And not only from a racing perspective, but just from a general the atmosphere in Montreal is generally so much better on a race weekend. As Montrealers, you and I know that they closed down, the main streets of downtown. They have cool cars roaming the streets. They have street festivals, food trucks. It's a great time. The city transforms itself into something that we don't see very often. So from a Canadian perspective, from a Montrealer perspective, it's really unfortunate. It's really sad that the pandemic has led to events like this. Obviously, there's worse things to happen in the world, as we've seen, but from a racing perspective, from a Montreal Grand Prix weekend perspective, it's unfortunate that it won't be happening this year. And from an F1 perspective, it's a great race to have on the calendar. It's probably it's my favorite track on the calendar. It's a high-speed track, narrow turns, fast chicanes. It's a great track.
I agree with you on that. I mean, let's start this off by saying public health officials are doing this to make sure that no one gets sick, right? And if they feel like the situation is that bad in Canada, that it would be extremely difficult to hold the Grand Prix, then it is in all of their right to cancel the Grand Prix. That being said, as a fan, it's still pretty disappointing to hear, especially since this is going to be the first circuit on the 2021 calendar that's going to be moved. So look, in general, I've talked to a lot of people who aren't Montrealers on top of that say that the Montreal circuit is such a great track and that a lot of them missed it last year, and now they're going to miss it this year now that it's canceled again. But I am a little bit comforted that the contract to keep the race in Montreal got extended. But I'm gonna miss the atmosphere. I mean, look, if they manage to keep the rest of the races going where they're going all around the world, it kind of sucks that Canada is being the only race so far that's been canceled. So, but
yeah, and on that note, we saw at the beginning of the season how they had to move Australia because Australia, for those who don't know, has similar quarantine requirements. For those who don't know, Canada has a 2-week quarantine requirement where you enter the country, you have to do a hotel quarantine, then take a COVID test, and depending on the result, a 2-week quarantine. It's generally a 2-week quarantine rule. So Australia has the 2-week quarantine requirement as well, and that's why they had to move the Australian Grand Prix. Which really bothered me was that for Australia, they moved the Grand Prix. And in Canada's case, they outright canceled it, and there was no talks of moving the Grand Prix till later in the year.
Yeah.
That's what bothered me about the situation. However, we still get a great track.
Yeah,
we still get a great race. Lance Stroll qualified P1 last year at this very track.
I'm ready. I'm ready for a second Lance pole.
Jono, tell me, what are your thoughts on the Istanbul city it's not a city circuit, the Istanbul
The
Park
Istanbul
circuit.
Park circuit.
It's
Okay.
I think it's called Istanbul City, something like that. But Jonah, you tell me, what are your thoughts?
I dig this circuit. I mean, uh, before last year, it wasn't on the grid since 2011, if I'm not mistaken. And we were treated to a crazy race weekend last year. Let's not forget that Lance. Lance was on pole in last year in Turkey. Um, but also, people said that resurfacing the track and making it completely impossible to drive without everyone spinning in the wet or in the dry was a bad idea. I love that. I think the fact that it really shows in areas like that where the drivers can really show their capabilities and not just have to rely on the car to push them further. And that's also why Lance got pole partially because he's so good in the rain, or
Yeah,
he's so good in difficult situations. So I don't think that we're gonna have like spins in free practice one and like 3,000 spins during the race, but I still think that it's going to be a great weekend. My favorite thing is turn 8. I am so ready for turn 8. If someone manages to do turn 8 flat out during any part of the weekend, I will be extremely impressed because it is a 4 apex left
yeah.
hand turn. I will be extremely impressed to see anyone try to do that flat out. I think qualifying is going to be crazy in that regard, and I'm really excited for the race.
And for that reason, Jonah, I completely agree with you. That 4 apex turn is what makes this Istanbul Park circuit so unique, that we don't get to see that in any other race on the calendar, because there are aspects to this circuit that make it so unique. Not only the turn, but the fact that it was just resurfaced, the fact that we have, like, there was wet weather last year and there's likelihood to be, tumultuous weather again. I'm a big fan of unpredictability, and this track, anything can happen.
Mm.
For those who don't know, last year, Lewis Hamilton qualified, was it eighth? I forget.
It
In the
was sixth, something
sixth
like
to
that.
eighth range.
Yeah.
And he made a charge and won his seventh his seventh world title at that track.
Yeah.
And nobody was expecting it because he was starting in sixth. Mercedes wasn't looking so strong in qualifying. I think Bottas also didn't have such a strong qualifying performance. It's a track where, because they haven't been to it in a while, it has such unique aspects to it, and they resurfaced it, and the weather. It is the best formula for unpredictability and a crazy weekend to come.
Yeah.
And
I'm so psyched. I'm ready for a Lance victory in 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now. I'm ready. Lance is gonna stick it on pole, and then he's gonna win at Turkey, redemption from last year.
that would be great if he could get the pole again.
Yeah. With that being said, though, yes, the Canadian Grand Prix got canceled. Istanbul Park is replacing the Canadian Grand Prix, but with the unpredictability of the COVID situation, which sucks, we could have another circuit that could get taken off the calendar. And now we need to go to what's next. If that ends up happening again, which hopefully it doesn't, because that would mean that COVID is getting worse or is remaining stagnant, and we don't want that to happen. But if that happens again, Jordan, where would we go?
So there is the question of where would we go and where I would like to see them.
Okay, where would you want to go?
Where would I want to go? So if Jordan was the commissioner of Formula One, I would tell my drivers to pack their bags and go back to Bahrain, because I would love to see the outer layout be raced on again. I love high-speed circuits. That's why I love Monza. It's why I like Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. I love high-speed circuits. And we were treated to an amazing race last year in Sakir. There has not been a race where the race winner was in last position at the end of lap one ever before. And we saw one of the most amazing charge through the field that we've ever seen in Formula One history that weekend. And there was the saga with George Russell. There was the two new rookies in the Williams and the Haas cars. And we were treated to some great high-speed racing. Very sharp corners and a track that's not an oval per se, but it's the closest to it. And I think that we were really lucky last year to see a circuit with such crazy speeds. And because it's a circuit that is not practiced on and not raced on so much, that is so high speed, we are again treated to a race where we don't know what would happen.
I did not expect that from you at all. And I'm gonna do a little bit of a question to you before I end up saying where I would want to go. A lot of that race, yes, was because Sergio Perez drove the race of his life. But a lot of that was also because poor George got screwed up in the pit lane and then got a puncture, and it basically took Mercedes out of the equation. Max Verstappen was out. Charles Leclerc was out. Alex Albon couldn't do what he needed to do to actually do well in a Red Bull. How much of that do you think is going to, like, do you think that same atmosphere is going to change with a lot of those key points of the race that we got last year back in the fold?
Yeah, and I think there will be even more unpredictability this year because we have cars now, especially Ferrari, for example, that are much better this year on the straights. McLaren also got better on the straights. So we're going to have cars that are more competitive. And because of the amount of overtaking zones following the straights on that track, we're gonna be seeing, that track, allows for a lot of overtaking already. We're gonna be seeing more if we go back this year. So I think it just reinforces that.
All right.
Jonah,
well, you ready for my pick? You ready for my pick? I'm gonna preface this by saying shout out to Steam because they allowed me to get an F1 game on my computer for $1.50 at one point on sale. And through that, I got the opportunity to drive a bunch of tracks that I wouldn't get to drive in the current F1 games. And one track that I would like to see back on the circuit again is Sepang in Malaysia. I didn't expect that. You didn't expect that, eh?
No, but I agree. I like that circuit a lot.
Sepang, I remember just going through the F1 game that I had and having the absolute craziest qualifying lap that I have ever done. On top of that, it was such. I watched a bunch of the highlights from the races up until 2017, and Verstappen winning in 2000, I think it was 2017, was one of the craziest races, as well as Sergio Perez almost winning at Sepang before he spun, but still managed to get a podium, but he spun because of the rain. It's always raining there. The weather is going to play a huge factor, but as well, it just pushes the drivers to their limit. So I would like to see F1 go back to Malaysia, go back to Sepang, and do that if they happen to do another circuit.
Look, I think that's a great pick. I would prefer mine. I think that is a great pick, though. So I do understand where you're coming from. Yeah, it was a regular. It was an annual. I think it was one of the first races of the season too. So it was.
Yeah, exactly.
So Kuala Lumpur is a great place for F1 to go to, especially because now they have two races in Asia. They were supposed to have Vietnam that got canceled, but they should
that
go
was
back
a
to,
saga in of itself, Vietnam.
yeah. But
So
yeah,
what they have in Asia, they have Suzuka in Japan.
they have the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai.
Yeah, but that one isn't even on the calendar this year.
No.
Makes sense. I don't like that track anyways. Is Singapore considered Asia or Oceania?
I consider it, I guess, in between.
It's in between. It would be that. So bring it back over there, because
Yeah.
I doubt that they're gonna bring back Fuji in Japan and have 2 races in Japan.
No.
And I doubt that they're gonna go to India, because I don't know what happened with India, but I like that circuit too. But apparently people just don't like it.
It's a classic, and we've had very good memories there, especially with Verstappen's win way back when.
Verstappen in India? No.
No, I'm talking about in Malaysia.
Oh, in Malaysia. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that if hopefully this doesn't happen, hopefully that we get the calendar that we have right now. But if something ends up happening, let's go to Sepang. That's it. Got any final thoughts, Jordan?
Look, I think that the calendar is a good one so far. You guys will have to hear what we think will be the best race of the year. And yeah, I'm looking forward to Portugal this weekend. This was a very, I guess, kind of last minute episode, because we had news breakout that was very closely related to,
who we are,
our version of F1 content, we are. Yes, exactly. And so we just wanted to share with you our brief thoughts. So we thank everyone for listening, for engaging with us, and we really encourage you to like our social media, follow our social media to be aware of when our next podcast comes out, and thank you, and
enjoy.
May the best man
Portugal.
win on Sunday.
Yeah, enjoy the race in Portugal, and we will see you for our race review. See ya.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.